Okay, can you tell me who you are and what your role is, please?
Right. Well, I'm currently co-leader from the working group Victims of Terrorism within the RAN.
I mean, can you tell me a bit about what happened to you, and then as little or as much detail as you're comfortable with? What is it? What's your background in terms of victim? What happened to you?
Right. Well, my sister was killed during the terrorist attacks from Brussels in 2016. So at that moment, we really thought of, okay, your whole world is changing, in fact. And we tried to bring together all the victims from the 2016 Brussels attacks so that we could find a kind of peer-to-peer support, get to understand each other better, this new path of life, how we can provide help to each other. And so we created an association, and we did this, we launched it in fact through the press, but also at the European Commission, because it was very difficult to get in touch with other victims in any other way. And from there, so we started to bring people together, and then we were invited by RAN to participate at the first European Remembrance Days for the Victims of Terrorism. This was in 2017 then, 11th of March 2017, and from there we really got into contact with RAN.
Okay, I'm going to break that down into little bits just because I think there's this thing just to be clear for our audience. So you created a network in Belgium, first of all. So I wonder if you could just spell out that it was in Belgium, and was it the first of its kind there?
Yes, so we created a network in Belgium, initially for the victims of the 2016 Brussels terrorist attacks. But of course, there were many nationalities who became victim of this terrorist attack because it happened in an airport and also in the subway in Brussels. So that's where we concentrated on getting us all together, and we realized also the importance of the cross-border victims, how difficult it is, and we also learned it the hard way of all the obstacles that were there to support in a correct way the victims of terrorism.
So what kind of obstacles were there? What did you find? What kind of obstacles were there initially for you?
Well, because here in Belgium, it's quite a complicated way of supporting victims of terrorism, at least in 2016. And because there were so many nationalities involved in the cross-border situation, many people, for example, were at the airport but were not physically injured. They went back to their country of origins, and then the trauma started to work. So then was recognition needed, right support, also the recognitions of the damage that was done in order to get the right help.
I mean, obviously the trauma involved in this is difficult to comprehend for most people.
Yes, well, it is quite logic that people who are at the place of a terrorist attack, when they see all these atrocities, the first reflection that we realized is that people tend to say, I was quite lucky because I'm not severely injured. Other ones are in a worse situation than me. And so people tend to try to take back their lives, and slowly they get over this shock, and then a kind of trauma can set in.
Yeah, I can imagine, sort of post-traumatic stress. And so how did you first hear about or come across the Radicalization Awareness Network? When was that, and how did that happen?
Yes, so end of 2016, I had a speech in front of the European Commission, and in the meantime, the association was created in Belgium. This was the first time that victims in Belgium from terrorism could come together. And then we were contacted indirectly about participating at the European Remembrance Day on the 11th of March 2017. And so there, when we went to the Remembrance Day in Brussels, we got in contact with all the other victims of terrorism throughout Europe, and you realize you are one big family. We can understand each other without going into details. It's just something apart, something different.
And can you explain the kind of role of the Victims of Terror Working Group?
Right, so the Victims of Terror Working Group, what we do, we come regularly together, we discuss about different topics. There is always the European Remembrance Day, that is a key element, because this working group is organizing this one. And it's something wonderful in the sense that it's really about networking. We always meet new people, but we also meet the same associations. We develop, we cooperate together. So it's really, really networking. It's a big family that sadly, of course, is getting bigger, but the need is there. Everyone has his expertise. Each country, each member state has somewhere a different approach. And we just learn from each other. And what we learn, we try to push it further throughout the member states, throughout the entities who are officially there to support the victims of terrorism, to bring this expertise in order that the victims of terrorism are better helped.
How important is it to have a network like this that reaches right across Europe, personally and professionally?
It's extremely important, because we always we see that in most cases there are cross-border victims when a terrorist attack happens in a bigger city. So already there we can, with a network, we can quickly act and support each other. And then at the end, it's really about sharing expertise. And it goes that way that we get to know each other so deeply. We work together pretty often that we can just pick up the phone and have a straight answer. So this is really helpful. But next to the working groups, Victims of Terrorism, maybe also get in touch with other working groups who are busy with everything what is prevention of radicalization. For example, Working Group Youngsters, or about the psychologists side, and there we can also find helps. We start to communicate, and it's like a big puzzle. Slowly we come together and we can work out all the items that are needed.
And I mean, I guess if RAN wasn't there, it would be much harder.
Oh, definitely. If RAN wasn't there, we wouldn't have that network. Here, RAN gives us a platform of finding each other, communicating and cooperating. So without RAN, it would definitely have been much harder to get in touch with each other.
And how does RAN help in terms of understanding what role victims can play in preventing or countering violent extremism? You know, I mean, there's a sort of shift maybe in understanding. There's people like Mike Haynes, I know, in the UK who are really like proactive in prevention, whereas maybe a decade ago, a victim was seen as just a victim and left to their own devices. So I wonder if you could explain how RAN helps in this understanding what role victims can play.
Yes, so definitely the voice of a victim is a strong voice, and victims have to work on rebuilding themselves, on resilience, to be able to cope and continue living. So this is a big job or hard work. It's of course an individual work, but we are all there to support and to give the right platform to be able to work as good as possible on this resilience sense. Of course, then a victim, through this experience, we can bring or show towards radicalization of how we are building up and show that we didn't get radicalized. Our ideas were not going to the radicalization. So there we have a voice. This is a unique voice. We also see when we talk with people who are on the path of radicalization who are already radicalized, that they are pretty surprised to hear our voice and hear our stories, our personal stories of resilience, because we do this on a voluntary basis. There is no obligation. Many times we realize that they see that people like psychologists or social workers, they have the impression sometimes they do this as a job. When the victims approach them, it's really out of our heart. It's really on a voluntary basis, and this surprises them also. And then we start to talk about, yes, the strength we are building and why we are not into revenge, but on the opposite, we are into resilience. And this is what we try to bring with. So On de-radicalization or prevention of radicalization, I think there are many different tools or many different groups. It's not one group who will reach what we would like to see, but it's all together. When we all work together, we all bring, I would say, a little seed there, and we try that the flower grows in that way, that prevention, or that there is prevention of radicalization.
I suppose, in a sense, another way of saying it is that the network of practitioners in Iran help you, enable you to be able to kind of do this and to communicate with others and to spread this message, yeah?
Yes, so we when you work with the other practitioners within RAN, everyone has a specialization. I think it's now really we need to coordinate, to cooperate, and see how we can support each other, because we all have the same targets in front of our eyes. It's preventing radicalization and getting a better society in Europe. So yes, we can really support each other, and we have all a beautiful role to play. Beautiful in the sense that when we are successful, it is something nice to have done something constructive out of the difficult lives we had to go through.
And how much have you learned from being in the network? You know, how much have you taken on since you've joined there and you've met people and you've looked at those other disciplines? There must be a big learning process as part of that as well.
It is definitely a big learning process. I mean, we are there in the network. Of course, once network is established and we go to the meetings and we see things, we have to try to put these things into practice and develop them further. So there is really a commitment that is necessary to be successful. But yes, we keep learning from expertise from all member states, because, for example, on victims of terrorism itself, we can see that some countries who have sadly a long experience of terrorism, they developed already over all these years a help that is more tangible and more direct, and so we try to learn from them, and they provide us this expertise. On the other hand, when we work, for example, with restorative justice, we learn from other countries who have a better expertise. So yes, altogether we try to catch up in time, that we are all working as good and cooperating as good as possible to be successful.
Yeah, and I suppose it's not just learning, it's also sharing, because you've got your perspective, you've got your experience, and you've got your knowledge as well.
Yes, so I think each member state has, we have different constitutions, so we developed things differently, but this doesn't mean that we can learn from the good practices and also learn from the bad practices from each other in order to do amendments, law amendments, or different approaches that we can coordinate these actions on prevention of radicalization as good as possible.
And you said about sort of like making a better society. Is that the goal for you with RAN? Is it like ultimately it's about improving the world we live in and society?
Yes, I think we are going through difficult times worldwide, and I think I've been living abroad, overseas for many years, and I've seen how many countries are really looking up and taking Europe as an example. So we are going through difficult times. We have our difficulties that we are different member states, that we have different cultures, is also a beauty. And there, I think really we have to learn from each other, because it obliges us to have the respect, the empathy of the different cultures, the different approaches. But the idea is that throughout Europe, we live in a more secure environment. And that's, yes, that we feel at home. Excellent.
What are your hopes for the future with RAN? What do you hope will happen with your organization? I mean, it's grown. I mean, first of all, has it grown much since you became part of it? Is it a growing network?
It's a growing network, definitely. Of course, regarding working group victims of terrorism, we always hope that this group is not growing. This is quite logic. But the RAN in generally, yes, we see many people are becoming concerned of the more and more polarized world we are living in, and people want to have a better Europe. So yes, there are more and more activities that are happening, and I think again that we can all coordinate with each other, learn from each other. For me, the biggest challenge is that we come with theories and expertise. The biggest challenge is to develop this on a practical side, that there's a real effective impact that we can feel within our society.
Great, and this is the last thing. I guess I haven't really asked you about your role properly as a working group leader and what that means and what you do. Can you tell me a wee bit about that?
Yes, so in the working group, as a working group leader, we try to, of course, first of all, we make a planning, we look at the priorities, but we also consult with all the other members of the working group. So in fact, we are somewhere managing a platform, but we need to leave it open and hear the voice of everyone. So we just try to coordinate it and bring it on a path that we can practically continue and work properly. But in fact, we just provide the platform of communication and give everyone the right and the possibilities to express themselves, also about priorities, about practices. So it's really about coordinating.
And you have meetings, and I guess you publish papers and things too. Is that right? As a working group?
Yes, we have different meetings throughout the year. So we take priorities for 1 year. We try to focus on specific topics that we then try to work out the expertise and bring forward papers that can be used by all member states.
And when was the Victims of Terrorism Working Group set up?
Well, I joined it in 2016, 2017. I know that one of our partners, which is the French association EFVT, has been many years busy with it and launched it about 10 years ago. So together with other victims associations, of course. But yes, there was a necessity to have also this voice of victims of terrorism within the RAN working group.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, you said that you hope that your group doesn't expand, and that's a really good point. I mean, I suppose if I said to you in 10 years' time, how would you like to see RAN? The answer might be that you wish there wasn't a need for it. But I mean, I wonder what you think. If you could answer that in 10 years, what would you want to see with RAN?
Well, if RAN would not be needed, it means that we are living in a perfect world, and we don't have to be naive. I think there is always work that needs to be done to prevent any type of radicalization. When we look through history, radicalization always came and went. It's like waves, it's history. So whatever we've seen and learned through history, we should, work on it, that radicalization is not happening. So I think there will always be a kind of need of this group. But of course, for the working group, Victims of Terrorism, we just would love to that this group slowly dies away. But I think, yes, realistically seen, it will be not possible, but we can always dream.
That's great. Thanks so much, Philippe, for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I'll put my camera on. Do you have, so you've got the information